Hey, we are live. Thanks to everyone who's taken a small part of their day to join us live on Connect the Dots, Dotfusion's bi-weekly web tech talk show, where we have taken the spirit and model from the car guys back in the day, when folks would just call in and ask questions about cars. And we thought, well, what a cool idea to create an environment for our friends, colleagues, and folks just generally interested in web technologies. Excuse me. To feel free to listen in, ask us anything. We'll do our best to provide answers. And if we can't answer immediately, we'll do our research and get back to you. So thanks again for joining us on LinkedIn Live. I believe we are also broadcasting through Instagram and Facebook. We have an amazing team behind us as well. Natalie and Marie are helping us out. And yeah, we're super stoked, fortunate and grateful to have a special guest with us this week. Maiya Holliday will be joining us. I think you're on the screen right now, from Mangrove Web Development. Sorry that I just had a little computer glitch there. And welcome to the show, and thanks for making some time to be with us and share some of your insights and expertise. And all right, let's get rolling, and maybe just take a minute and introduce yourself. It's a pleasure to have you join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It's very exciting. It's probably my first international broadcast aside from FaceTiming my in-laws in Australia. But I am the CEO and founder of Mangrove Web. We're a design and web development agency located in California and in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada as of a year ago. We also have a remote team that are in Europe and across the States. So we basically use our creative and technical skills to amplify the work of change makers and do that by doing web strategy, identity, branding, and web design and dev. I started Mangrove. Actually, we're turning 15 in May. I started Mangrove when I was traveling around in Panama and freelancing years ago. And now we're a 15-person team. So it's pretty cool to round the bend on another kind of milestone year and look at where we've come.
Oh, super cool. Yeah. And just to our audience that's listening in, the idea here is we have some folks manning the chat channels. If you do have any questions about web technology or anything else that we might be talking about today, feel free to put some stuff in the comments, and I'll do my best to be tracking things. But Maiya, we stumbled across each other, I think, as part of our B Corp journeys and community. We also care about women in technology and especially in kind of underserved parts of the world. We really invest in women in tech in Cambodia. And I know that's something that you care a lot about. Just as a way of kind of kicking things off and introducing you, kind of what's on your mind? What are you caring about these days? What do you feel is important to share? And we'll get into some web tech stuff as well.
Yeah. I'll give a little bit more history, which kind of shows where we landed. But I studied international development and thought I was geared towards something in like global health or political advocacy or something in that realm. And then I worked for a nonprofit after college, and they actually did volunteer trips in Thailand and Tanzania. And I felt like we were really like we're really removed from actual impact because we were working with locals on the ground I worked in Tanzania for a couple months while I was there. And we were, basically just working through locals who already had their own connections and already had their own impact and small nonprofits on the ground. And it just felt kind of like indirect and a little bit disingenuous to me. And so one of my many jobs working there was also to make updates on the website. And I realized I actually really loved doing that, and ended up like just kind of teaching myself some web development while I was there, and then ended up leaving and actually just freelancing and doing web development for small organizations and nonprofits I felt were doing really good work. And I really loved like the technical and creative work that I could do in designing and creating websites. At that point in time, I kind of thought I was a web designer, but I'm not. I'm a developer, and so that's kind of how Mangrove was born, in terms of like just using these skills that are really transferable to all sorts of organizations, all sorts of even across different spoken languages, and just amplify the work of change makers and support people to create their own impact in a more effective way. And that to me felt like the way that I could make a much bigger difference. And so we became, so over the years, we've worked with like nonprofits and small to medium progressive businesses, some like foundations and, environmental organizations, political justice. And we became a B Corp in 2016, which is how you and I originally became connected. And for me, the B Corp certification was just kind of solidifying a lot of what we were already doing. And it just gave me a path forward to keep creating more of an impact-driven business, and maybe instead of, or in addition to focusing on working with purpose-driven clients, like figuring out how we internally could be a more impactful and more diverse and conscious and purpose-driven business amongst ourselves. So yeah, it's always been kind of at the heart of Mangrove to do kind of design and dev for good. And then the women in tech aspect, at the time that I was starting Mangrove, like I didn't know any other women who were developers. And I often was, there were often assumptions like, oh, you're a designer. And I don't know, there was just like, that was 15 years ago, but it wasn't something that at the time like felt really limiting for me. I actually kind of felt pride in being like, no, I'm actually a developer, and that's not your first assumption, but that's my, I think I bring my own maybe slightly different perspective to it. But as we've grown Mangrove, like I've really focused on building a more diverse team, and finding like women and a range of people who we can build out the team and make it more diverse so that we have different perspectives on the team.
So. Yeah, super cool. I know the challenges of just simply growing and maintaining, a digital shop in general, and it adds a little bit more, I guess, meaning. Definitely, there's a lot more to deal with when you're going out of your way to, not only be working for maybe nonprofit or less budget-laden organizations, but also making sure that that you're really taking care of your team as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about just kind of currently there's discussions around AI for development and code writing, and I find that I'm aware of challenges for folks that are kind of just starting careers in development in general. What does Mangrove kind of do, or how do you approach bringing kind of folks that are just kind of in the discovery phase? It could be younger people changing careers, for folks that want to get into code, where we've got AI kind of writing code as well as kind of an entry level person. I don't know. We're struggling with that ourselves over here, and it just kind of might be an interesting conversation of where you see AI's role in the development cycles for an agency like yours.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I don't really have a great answer to that question yet, but and I've also always been kind of struggled with just answering like where to start in tech, because I literally had like a CSS book and then just Googled a bunch of things and learned like
New
in a
Riders
very
publication.
yeah, in a very sort of non-linear way. And I think at this moment in time, there's just like such a breadth of information and coding boot camps you can do and programs and this and that. And then now there's even AI on top of that. And so I think it's hard to know where to start. I would try to actually just connect with folks who are kind of like mid level or coming out of different programs and see like what feels useful and just keep learning. I mean, the best or just stay curious and aware of like what's going on in the world, and that may or may not be all that helpful. But our dev team, like one of the characteristics of each one of them is like and something that's I think is vital is like the adaptability of each one of them and the constant learning, because one thing that's always clear in dev is that it's always going to change. And so having like a really foundational set of foundational education or a set of an understanding of code is important, but you can get that in a variety of different ways. And then it's really about just dabbling in a lot of different areas, and that might be new AI tools, but whatever you're using today is probably going to be obsolete in a year, or there's going to be something newer. And so I'm curious actually of your thoughts on that too, Chris, because we're still figuring out like ways in which AI can solve kind of lower hanging fruit so that we can just use our brains more strategically for the rest of the work. But I don't know that like that's helpful for someone who's just getting into the space.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And we're kind of struggling with that as well, because a lot of our impact programs are around developing introductory skills. But now, like, where is the introduction for development skills? Is it at prompting, or is it at kind of actually hands on the keyboard kind of stuff? And we don't know the answer to that either. We know fundamentally that there needs to be some broader sense of almost like computer science, but not necessarily meaning an academic approach. It's just the understanding of how does it all kind of work, and what are the fundamental aspects of languages. How you actually get the code written, I think, is where we're trying to figure out. One idea that we seem to have harmonized on is mentoring is important, regardless of what we're mentoring. So if you can match up, just like you said, with someone who's has been in the scene a little bit longer, and then you can kind of bend and flow with the seniors, because they're also having to deal with this as well, right? And it's going to be a different kind of landscape. Maybe on that topic of technology in general, love your opinion, or maybe your perspective on web platforms. What does Mangrove kind of think about this? Where are you guys heading? There's a cohort of folks that tune into the show both now and in the kind of podcast version later, that are marketing executives that are often tasked to make like large web decisions amidst everything else they're doing. And maybe there's new kind of trends or recommendations you might have for marketers to consider as they move forward with web decisions.
Yeah, I mean, we've been a really WordPress focused shop for the last decade plus, but every year we've also been like, WordPress isn't going to be the thing forever, and we're waiting for a moment in which like things shift. And so I think WordPress is still a great platform for a variety of circumstances. And then we're also just looking into a lot more like headless solutions, like lighter weight CMSs. We're doing some builds on Cloud Cannon and Contentful. And, there's again, it's like back to the concept of things forever changing. There's actually so many headless CMSs now that it feels like there's a new one at every corner. Yeah. And so I think the more important thing is to make sure you're just really clear on like what your needs are and what the goals of the project are and what your needs are internally as an organization in terms of managing the site over time, and then what, your end users need, and then work with an organization or work with a team that you really trust to move through the strategy phase with you and get clear on what the features and functionalities of the site need to be. And then, then you can map out like what solutions make the most sense, like for your use case now, for what you might need in a year or two. I think that sometimes folks like get really prescriptive about what they need, and maybe it's and we've had many people come to us and say like, we need a WordPress site, and that is a great solution for them. But beyond even just choosing the CMS, I think there's, sometimes there's folks can have like a bit of like a organizational identity crisis, like partway into rebuilding a website, because they realize that they haven't maybe answered some of the foundational questions around like, who are we and where are we in this moment in time as an organization, and where are we going? And, redoing the website is, how hard it is to write your own bio, and like redoing your website is that, tenfold for your whole organization and for yourself as a leader if you're involved in the process. And so I think just making sure that it's important to just make sure there's that like initial strategy, time and space, and getting really clear on like what your needs are. And then that will inform whatever CMS makes the most sense for you. And then like, what functions need to be built out initially for the website, what maybe can be a V2, what needs, what's really serving your audience, and what's also like solving problems for you and your organization internally. Like, what are the things that either your website or AI or another technical tool could take care of, so you're not like handling data and having having inconsistencies or redundancies in your data, or doing manual labor that you don't need to be doing. Like, I don't ever want to see anyone having to like copy and paste things when a website or some other tool can do it for you. So
yeah, absolutely. And you just got me thinking about WordPress. I'm helping an organization with an RFP right now, and there's some discussion around CMSs and things, and WordPress kind of, it gets hit with a little bit of an inadequacy for some reason, but WordPress is super powerful. And I just had a really cool chat with a chap who manages all of NASA's websites, and they're all on WordPress. So those are, they have to be very secure. There's kind of all kinds of information. So just thinking through your point that the platform isn't the problem. You can kind of make a platform do anything. Hey, and
visitors.
So, yeah. Hey, bud. How you doing? We got the team is here.
It's early morning for us on the West
Good
Coast.
morning.
So here
on the West Coast. Thanks for joining. Your hair looks like mine on the cover of the intro. Yeah, so and most platforms will do the trick for sure. But I did want to just chat about something else that I know that is important to you, and thankfully increasingly important to larger organizations, and that's digital web accessibility and approaches and thinking around that. And we had a chat a couple of weeks ago with Derek, who is really around kind of socially centered design and making sure that the folks that we're serving are part of the teams that are in the development process. But do you want to share some of your thoughts around accessibility and your approaches?
Yeah, this is actually something I've really been learning a lot about over the past couple of years. And I stopped coding actually when Turner, who just came in here, the older one, when he was born, was kind of when I transitioned from being like, working in the business to working on the business. And so I haven't coded in a long time. And so my experience, coding hasn't included really building for accessibility. And so it's something that I'm learning. I've learned a lot about over the last couple of years. And then I'm also learning a lot like by working with our developers and seeing the way that they're implementing things. But, the core of it is really that people with disabilities are actually probably the largest minority of users that are using your website or app or technology. 1 in 4 people in the States has a disability, and it's like an area it's really been left behind disproportionately, I think. And so we, when we're designing and developing websites, and even when you're writing content for the web, there's a variety of ways in which you can make things more accessible. And that ranges from, the things that people think of most when thinking about accessibility on the web is color contrast. And there's a lot of implementations for people who have visual impairments, but there's also a whole host of things you can do under the hood of the website that allow people it basically allows folks who are using assistive technologies to connect into your website to use their tools to adjust their experience with your website to work for them. So it might be someone who has a seizure disorder who has can one click pause all the motion on the site. But if you haven't actually created the tag on the site for that feature to connect to their tool, then they won't be able to do that. And so, and then, the other thing about accessibility is it's really a spectrum. Or digital accessibility, you're not going to ever have something that's 1,000% accessible, because there's so many different experiences and disabilities. And so, you really kind of have to just, try to tailor what you're building to your users, but also just do the best you can, and then keep figuring out what you can do better, and just keep moving forward and stay open and curious to what you can improve upon. And often just writing an accessibility statement and making sure there's multiple ways in which someone can contact you is important, because one person may be able to call, one person might be able to email and report issues, and then you work from there. But you kind of just want to start where you are with accessibility, start learning about it, ask your dev or design team what you can do to make your website more accessible. Don't use the overlay things that sound great and promise that you can just install a widget and it'll make your whole site accessible. They don't work. So I know we don't have a ton of time, and I could talk about web accessibility for quite a long time, but I'll share some resources as well in the show notes. One of the things that I really love about the tools and resources at hand, and even just the accessibility assessments of websites, is that they're very informative and instructive. And so when if you go through there's webaim.org, and then the ALI project, A11Y project.org. I think that's correct. And the aliproject.com. Both of those things, if you use those tools, it'll not only tell you what's not accessible about your site, but it will also explain why. So this is preventing this, someone from accessing the site in this way, whether it's visual or whether it's that someone can't move through it with a keyboard, or there's a lot of really good information as you're using those tools, and kind of it's a really good way to start understanding it. So I would just say, just start where you are, just start learning. And then
great point.
the other thing is the Wave WebAIM tool. So we'll share those as well.
Okay, that's awesome. And just a thank you to folks who have made some time to join us here. I can't see who's on LinkedIn, but if you do have any questions, and we encourage you to ask us anything, we have Maiya Holliday here, who's expert and experienced in all things web tech. She runs a really great web development agency. We've actually had you work on projects for us, as a matter of fact. So it's been really cool being a collaborator with your team. Also kind of with your outreach into Canada. That's really cool. Do you want to just share with any of the folks that are kind of responsible for taking on large tech projects. Do you have any advice on like where do you start if your kind of leadership team is kind of placing a migration or a big modernization, which is kind of current these days? There's a lot of sites that are getting to that 5 to 7 year mark, and they've hung on to some outdated tech. But where do you start? How do you organize your thinking that's maybe different from 5 years ago?
I think it's important to start by, as I was saying before, just making sure that you have some time and space and the team in place to help you work through the strategy part. But even in advance of that, if you haven't even started kind of talking to web dev agencies, a really good way to start is just by like surveying the content on your site and starting to do, like, we call it a keep kill list, which is a horrible name, but just start identifying like what's actually still useful and what can go. And the more you can kind of cull down the content in advance of actually starting to rebuild, the better. It's similar to moving. You're going to try to hang on. You're going to try to hang on to certain things, but they might actually not be serving you. And it's probably a really good time to do that spring cleaning. And sometimes people do that just by doing like a Google Doc of all of the pages and just mark things as like still relevant or not. Also with blog posts, there might be like 16 years of blog posts, and just kind of thinking about whether or not people are actually going to go back to some of those things. The nice thing about reducing content is it's going to make the process a little bit easier. It's going to allow you to be more forward thinking and really take what's still serving you and then move forward, and then add to that whatever is going to like build your organization or your project or whatever, move it forward. And then like that will just be a really good foundation. That's work you're going to have to do at some point in time anyway. And then just start thinking about like what you as a manager of your website or as a CEO or whatever, like what could your website be doing that could save you time, or what is the website doing or not doing? Just think about like what are the things that serve you, because the back end of the site and the management of the site and what the site can do for you internally as an organization is as important as what it can do, how it's presented to your end users, and just explore those things, throw them all out in the beginning stages of conversations so that you can have, the professional that you're working with think through that whole spectrum with you and then devise a plan. So,
I've got a question.
Some time to do that.
I have a question from me on behalf of some of my customers, and just so the audience knows, we don't script a whole lot of this conversation. We just want to keep it pretty freestyling. But we've been thinking a lot about how do we make adjustments to the structured content insights as we start thinking about AI and kind of the robots starting to query information, as we kind of, I can already see a slight decoupling from your traditional Google Bing search to using tools like Find, PHIND, that are much more GPT driven, kind of, instead of like, I'm looking for some white size 10 shoes and getting a list of, a page full of options. It'll just go, and how much do you want to spend? And do you want gold speckles in the laces? Here they are. So we've been having customers saying like, how are you guys adjusting to getting us ready to be read by AI search? Wondering if you guys are thinking about that. And we don't have answers ourselves, but we're curious.
Yeah, we're starting to, I know Natalie's going to cut us off in a minute, but like, I'm going to take that and pivot a little bit, because there was a question about how accessibility affects SEO. And so for the moment, while it's like very unclear, like the whole world of AI is like rapidly developing. And so one thing that's great is like a lot of the best practices in accessibility also overlap with best practices in SEO and performance and other things. So we're just trying to build things that are as like future proof and that gracefully degrade as a whole, and then start to touch on like how that's hooking into AI and all of that. But the accessibility is a really designing and building for accessibility overlaps with just really good user experience, and overlaps with good performance, and overlaps with good structure for SEO. And so like, as long as those things are really solid as a core, I think then you can start to build upon like all of those additional use cases, which are in AI territory and beyond. I'm gonna leave that one there for now.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, I think to your point, it keeps things clean in the code layer, essentially. And if things are clean down there, they're clean from a schema data, structured data, and kind of get you off on the right foot for sure.
Yeah.
I just had 13 other things to ask you about, but we might have to do a part 2. Just getting the sign from the amazing team behind the scenes, Natalie and Marie, who are always helping us take care and manage the show. Thank you, guys. We're just going to bring this to a close. Maiya, thank you very much. Super stoked that you're here with us. Thank you to everyone who made a little bit of time to join in and listen during the early or very early part of their day, depending on where you are. We'll be back in a few weeks with special guest Kenneth McLean from Marketize, and we'll be talking about kind of specific MarTech strategies. But until then, Maiya, Marie, Natalie, thank you very much. Have wonderful days.
Thank you.
See you later.
I'm gonna go
Bye.
have practice with these crazy kids. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.